You're listening to If These Woods Could Talk, produced by the Rhinelander District Library. More information can be found at rhinelanderlibrary.org. If these woods could talk, they might get a little big for their birches and cancel their plans with you to go be famous instead. Just joking, Jackie. I was recently tasked with trying to reorganize our storage room and make an attempt at indexing dozens of dust-covered boxes filled with relics of RDL's past. Honestly, it's a dream job. And while digging around, I found a box filled with those fold-over pouches from the 1 Hour Photo Lab, and within them I found a picture of author Jacquelyn Mitchard in front of a pile of books at a table inside RDL. So I did a search online for her name and Rhinelander, and I found a New York Times article from 2011. And I found there turned out to be a pretty cool story behind that photo. So I thought, what the heck? I tried reaching out to her, and I received an enthusiastic reply within minutes, like 4 minutes, which was awesome. It was really cool. She was interested in participating. That's all I've got to say. So in her own words, here's Jacquelyn Mitchard.
Although I grew up on the west side of Chicago, I later lived in Wisconsin for more than 30 years. I still consider it my home. Mostly people there remember me fondly, though I haven't lived there in quite some time. But there's one place in Wisconsin, deep in the great North Woods, where I am the unforgiven. Here's the thing about Wisconsin. If on a winter's night a traveler should slide her car into a snowy ditch and then discover that this little spin not only flattened a tire but also bent a wheel, presently someone will come along. That person, who will seem genderless because of the parka, scarf, mittens, balaclava, and flappy hat, will get out of the car, slapping a tire iron against a palm, a sight that in any other place would cause a person to forget all about the bent tire in light of the impending homicide. But the genderless puffy person will then proceed to help locate the spare and change the tire, then follow you to the nearest gas station just to be on the safe side. He will then depart, refusing payment or even recognition. You will say to the service station attendant, "Who was that flap-hatted person? I wanted to thank him." That is why I loved Wisconsin. When it came to time to leave that place, where the mosquitoes were the size of Airedales and the politics ranged from right to just all right, I cried so hard that I almost couldn't steer. Yes, I was moving to Cape Cod, a prospect that wouldn't ordinarily prompt such vocal grief, but I was leaving those dear hearts and gentle people. In Wisconsin, you mean just what you say. Which is why some 25 years ago I suffered the fact that I had to break my word to the people I love best as a writer, just as much as readers, which is to say librarians. Now, granted, keeping my word on that occasion might have meant that my biography would read, instead of Jacquelyn Mitchard, New York Times bestselling author, instead Jacquelyn Mitchard, writer of one novel read briskly by people who share her last name, which means about 6 families in all of North America. I'm grateful for the blessings that redounded to my failing to keep my promise. That doesn't mean that I don't still feel bad about it. Let me tell you how it happened. My first novel, called The Deep End of the Ocean, was published on a June day, and a few months later I got a call from the Rhinelander Public Library. Rhinelander is a town in the Great North Woods, famously the home of a mythological monster called the Hodag. but also of a really nice public library. If I would visit and talk about my book, I would get to stay overnight, and the folks would buy my dinner. So would I visit? I agreed. Why would I not? And I would still agree, my home folk, although you would have to fly me there from Massachusetts, as I'd do anything to make it up to you for what happened next. Hint. My newest novel, The Birdwatcher, an upbeat tale of a young magazine journalist covering the trial of her childhood best friend, a brilliant biology student turned high-priced call girl, accused of murdering her two best clients for their insurance money, will be out in 2025. Back then, the answering machines had little tapes in them. They were cute. They recorded maybe 3 minutes of message before the beep. An intern from the University of Wisconsin worked for me at that time, a couple of days a week, for class credit. One day he said to me, "Listen to this message. It's from Oprah Winfrey." I played the message and the voice said, "This is Oprah Winfrey, and I want you to know that I have not been as moved by a book in 10 years as I have by The Deep End of the Ocean. And further," I said to my intern, "that is not Oprah Winfrey. It is someone horsing around with me," and I erased that message. What seemed like proof of my good instincts to dismiss it came the next day with yet another message from herself, and I knew that if the first message had not been Oprah Winfrey, the second message definitely was not Oprah Winfrey, because heck, the real Oprah Winfrey would not have called twice or at all. She instead would have had one of her people call me, so there. I erased that too. On the third day, according to the legend, my intern listened to that not so obviously not really Oprah Winfrey and said, "Jack, I think this really is Oprah Winfrey, because listen to how mad she is." And indeed, Oprah went on for the full 3 minutes to the end of the little tape, saying she didn't know if I even lived here at all, but if I did, could I do her the common courtesy of at least returning her phone call, because wouldn't I show that much respect for anyone, and so forth. Well, I called back then. Oprah quickly took the phone and told me that she didn't really feature fiction on her show because it was voyage to the bottom of the ratings. But she just wanted to tell me how much my novel had meant to her, having done so many stories about families who had lost or exploited children. I thanked her. She said she was sorry she couldn't do more about the book because she wished everyone would read it. I was deeply touched. I thanked her again. We parted. The next day she called back and said she was going to start the world's largest book club with The Deep End of the Ocean. With her producer, she came up with a date. She told me when it was and that I'd be flown to my old hometown, Chicago, which was then Oprah's base, for the on-air book club luncheon with hand-chosen members and an audience filled with readers who'd read the book. I told her that was nice, and I was honored, but I could not come. That was the same date as my visit planned for the Rhinelander Public Library, so I refused. Everyone I knew, and everyone they knew, thought that I was nuts. "Are you kidding?" one person said to me. "You're giving up your chance to be on the New York Times bestseller list? To go to a library event in northern Wisconsin?" "It's the home of the Hodag," I explained, and I promised. Even the publicist at Viking Press, who pointed out to me that being on Oprah Winfrey's show wouldn't have any appreciable effect because there was one catch. And it was catch 1 or 2. That is, people who read books don't watch daytime TV and all that, ordered me to call off the Rhinelander Public Library event and explain the conflict. And eventually, I did. I never forgot what the person I spoke to said to me. He said, "The Jackie we know would never have done this." I felt like Brutus. I felt like hell. But off I went to Oprah land, and now, as my husband says of my novels, instead of long story short, he calls them short story long. You know what happened because it's history. Although the late 90s were the heyday of the book club movement, no one ever suspected that even the great O could be such an oracle. Still, it is true that only twice in the history of book publishing has a publisher had to borrow the use of other companies' printing presses to print enough books to sell. The other time was the printing of my favorite novel, Betty Smith's A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. There were about 100,000 copies of The Deep End of the Ocean when I went on the Oprah Winfrey Show. Just days after the broadcast, there were 400,000 copies in print and more tumbling off the presses. The Deep End of the Ocean shot from the bottom to the top of the New York Times bestseller list and every other list and stayed there for a good long time. And I went from being Jacquelyn the Obscure to Jacquelyn the Oprahfied. All because of the Oprah Winfrey Book Club, which I nearly ended before it started. I was afraid to call the Rhinelander Public Library because I knew that everyone there hated me, and rightly so. Time, lots of time, passed until one day, in this eastern seaboard galaxy where I live, far away, I got a call from the Rhinelander Public Library from a nice fellow named Matt, who bade me to write this little thing. And now I have? Is all forgiven? I really am sorry, and I have learned a lesson. If you were to invite me to the Rhinelander Public Library again, I swear by the hodag that if I agreed to come and everything was arranged and Oprah Winfrey called again, or Jenna, I would do exactly the same thing as I did before.
Speaking on behalf of the library today, all is forgiven, of course. And after learning more, I hope that you will, in turn, forgive the library for its part in what I will call a miscommunication. And thanks again, Jackie. And thank you for listening to If These Woods Could Talk, produced by the Rhinelander District Library. Thanks to the Old Pine Road Band for the musical theme. Follow If These Woods Could Talk on Facebook and Instagram, subscribe on your podcast platform of choice, and now find us on YouTube as well, where you can find new episodes by searching for Rhinelander District Library.